Morning, everyone. Wherever you are in the world, I hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe. My name is Randy Bell, and I'm the director of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council. Thank you all for joining us for EnergySource Innovation Stream, where we highlight new energy technologies with the potential to reshape the global energy system. Today, we'll be hearing from Chaz Roemer, chairman and the largest owner of G2 Net Zero LNG, which will be the world's first net zero LNG export and industrial gas production complex. I'm sure you're all going to have questions about how this will work, but before Chaz gets started, two administrative details. First, you can follow us on Twitter at AC Global Energy and use the hashtag InnovationStream. Second, after Chaz's presentation, you can submit questions through the Q&A function on Zoom, and I'm going to try to get to as many of these questions as I can. If you're watching on another platform like YouTube, unfortunately, we can't take your questions. So please let me welcome Chaz to the Atlantic Council. Chaz, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Randy. Very glad to be here. Look forward to our conversation. I hope it's organic. I don't have a big PowerPoint presentation to show everyone. I want to talk about the things that we're doing and how it may change the landscape for energy throughout the world. So I appreciate you having me.
Got it. Well, thank you for being here. How are you doing during these really unprecedented times?
First of all, I'd send out my sympathies to the world too, and my best for everybody that's dealing with the variety of things we're having to deal with right now. But it's been an interesting time for us. My company is we do a number of different developments. We're not just an energy company, and we're kind of in the innovation business. We've started a bank with no branches. We did that 15 years ago before it was unheard of. It's now publicly listed. We invested in AI so that you could be both more secure but less intrusive in that security. So we spend time trying to figure out ways that we can improve quality of life, ways that we can improve the economy in Louisiana. And this period of time has been very interesting for us in that it actually gave us a chance to take a breath and think about what we want to do moving forward in addition to our net zero development. So we've actually starting a small business fund to help companies come out of COVID in Louisiana, small mom and pop companies primarily that need that help. We're starting an educational and athletic center of excellence to serve all kids and combine those aspects, the idea that you can learn about life through sports and education. So we're doing a number of things that we're excited about, and none more exciting than our net zero project. But we're doing a number of things that we think are very innovative and will help the quality of life here.
That's really fantastic. How did you get here with this net zero LNG? What's the story behind that?
Well, I live in Louisiana. Most people don't know me. They don't know my company. We're relatively small in the world of finance. We've not, spent a great deal of time out publicizing ourselves, quite frankly. But about 5 years ago, Louisiana is primarily a petrochemical, oil and gas based economy for the most part. Between that and small businesses, and you've got 95% of the employment in our state. And our company started considering what is the future of energy? How can we participate in that? And our first step was that we had a 1,200 acre site, quite frankly, near the Gulf of Mexico and near Lake Charles, Louisiana. And we thought it would be a perfect site for the development of an LNG facility. And this was during a period of time when you heard about a number of people considering developing an LNG facility. LNG seemed to be a clean alternative to more traditional fossil fuels. And we started down the same path a lot of other companies did. And, we went looking for offtake agreements. We started doing our design work. We actually entered the FERC process to get our permitting. But after doing that for a few years, it became less compelling. I thought we would be less competitive. I didn't see that we had an inherent advantage in the market. I didn't see that the market was actually moving our direction. And we took a step back and said, A, should we continue this development? And B, if so, how should we do it? And we took our own advice. We advised a lot of other companies on innovation, and we said, okay, we have this idea and this project. What would you do to innovate it? How would you make it more competitive? How would you make it more compelling? How would you make it fit into the fabric of the world that's changing? The idea that you can be both clean and use older fuels. Is it possible? And so we asked the question was, well, what would you do to differentiate yourself? What would you do so that you could actually be a long-term solution for the energy needs of the world and the need to clean up the environment? How would you do that if you were doing an LNG facility? Well, the obvious answer was, how clean can we be? Let's take a step back and let's look at how we're currently designed and how can we improve that. So the first question was, our goal was, well, let's be net zero. That was kind of a phrase you started hearing people talk about, and so we had to define first, what does net zero mean? For some, net zero just meant, doing buying off puts and off takes and offsets so that they could claim they were carbon neutral, and that's fine. I'm not against offsets, but we wanted to be more than just offsets, and so we said, okay, how much of our emissions can we actually capture at our facility? And I'm not an engineer, I'm not a physicist, I'm not a chemist. I'm a capitalist and I'm a business guy, but I think it's important for capitalists and business people to become active in solving these issues that our world needs to solve. I don't want to wait on the government to tell us how to do it. I don't want to wait on the government to give us solutions. I think we have to have businesses innovate, use our know-how, how to improve things. And so we hired some of the best companies in the world to help us do this. We brought in Siemens. We brought in a company called 8 Rivers and Net Power. We engaged Ernie Moniz, the former Secretary of Energy, to help us look at this issue and to really determine at our facility how much of our emissions could we capture. Well, we actually determined, using technology that exists, by the way, that we could capture 100% of our emissions at our facility. Now, you always have some leakage and some small, but 100% in essence could be captured. But then we really question, is that net zero? By capturing all of your emissions at your facility, are you actually net zero? And we did something that we think is innovative. As an energy company, we invited in environmental groups to meet with us. And I'm not going to list their names because they did me a favor of coming to meet with me privately. And I said, this is what we want to do. And what do you think about it? And their first impression was, well, it's great that you're capturing all your emissions at your site, but we think you need to go further. We think you need to look upstream. You need to go to the wellhead. You need to go to your source of your gas. And what can you do on that end? So, again, we like to think we innovate, and we innovate more than just technology. We innovate in how we do our business. And so we want to invite stakeholders in early. We're a blank piece of paper. I have a blank piece of land. So I'm free to design and do whatever I want to do. So we then took their advice and said, okay, let's go upstream and let's determine how well we can do reducing our emissions at the wellhead. We hired a group out of Oklahoma, Ming Energy, who've done a fabulous job. They focus on that particular part of the oil and gas industry of how can we be both more efficient and lower emissions and capture more of the emissions at the wellhead. And we concluded we could capture, and I'm summarizing this without getting into details, we could capture about 85% of our emissions upstream and in the transportation to our facility. And then that would leave us a small component to do an offset. Okay, so we'll use a small component. So now we're net zero. Our product will be net zero from the wellhead until when it leaves our facility. And then ultimately, we want to bring our technology to the end users so that you can enclose a circle. You have a circle from wellhead to end user where you're capturing all your emissions. So that was the first part of our innovation is, can you do it? And we decided you can do it. Now, here is the more important question for us. I am a capitalist. I'm not a not-for-profit organization. Is can you make money doing it? You know, everybody talks about cost and the price of doing innovation, and we can't be competitive in the world and be clean. And I'll tell you that's not true. Okay, the idea that you either have to be profitable or be clean is not true. And through a number of sources, and I'll give you a summary of it. You know, in the capture of the emissions that we do at our facility or will do at our facility, we capture a number of products that will also be net zero products by the way, that give us an additional, and I'm going to tell you the number, $400 million in revenue. And by the time I capture those revenues and apply it to my per unit costs, and I want to bore everybody with the details of that, but I end up with a net zero LNG product that's also less expensive than my competitors. So that's where we stood. And then we said, what is the world going to demand? You know, 196 countries signed the Paris Accord. And so we started talking to people around the world and said, if we develop a net zero LNG facility from the wellhead to out of the back of our facility, and also provide you some technology on your end to help reduce your emissions, would you be intrigued? And without exception, the answer was yes. So we pivoted. We pulled out of the FERC process, and we are going to re-enter the FERC process, but come up with an entire new product. You know, I would tell you, you know, I don't even think people want to say I'm in the LNG business. You know, I'm not in the LNG business. No, I'm in the innovation business. My product that we're going to create is completely different than anyone else. It's kind of like comparing GM to Tesla. They both build cars. You know, one of them's worth $35 billion. One of them's worth $150 billion. One of them created 2 million cars last year. One of them created 200,000 cars last year. Well, guess which one is worth the most? The one that did 200,000 cars. They're in the innovation business. They're not in the car business. So we're the same way. We're in the innovation business. And then I'd make one final point, and I know I want to get to the questions.
Yeah, they're already coming in.
Okay. You know, 20 years ago, and probably longer than that, the U.S., the question in the U.S. that a lot of people are asking is, can we be energy independent in America? Okay. There's no doubt that not being energy independent causes us geopolitical problems. Well, I want to give the oil and gas industry credit. They use their innovation, they use their technology, and today we stand in a world that in the United States that is energy independent. So our challenge in an energy state, I live in Louisiana, our challenge is now is, can we use those same assets? Can we use that same energy and yet make it clean? And I'm here to tell you that we can, that we're going to lead that charge and help others do the same. So that's a summary of where we stand. I'd love to, you know, answer more questions. I can talk forever, by the way. So, you know, but that's an overview of where we are and where we stand. And I'm excited to be here today.
Chaz, that's fantastic. A question from me, but also ties into a question from Caroline Evans from upstreamonline.com. What's the timeline on the project? And sure. Caroline asked specifically about the timeline for re-entering the FERC process.
Sure. Great question. Well, another interesting thing about our business models is different than a traditional LNG facility. Okay. One of the difficulties, and I give people credit that have done it, okay, because it's hard to go develop a $10 billion facility. One of the problems with developing an LNG facility is it takes a long time. Okay. It takes 60 months if things go well to go from where we stand a year ago to where you'd want to be producing LNG. One of the aspects of our business plan that's different, because this answers her question, is we will actually have parts of our facility, the part that generates electricity, by the way, that we will then capture the emissions in that generation. We'll have that in place in 2 to 3 years and generate revenue in 2 to 3 years rather than having to wait 60 months or 72 months. So we start our facility the production part of it much sooner than a traditional LNG facility. Now, we probably won't enter FERC again until the beginning of the year, 2021. Okay. COVID is, the things that we're all dealing with, we're having to deal with, and that's changed the timeline a little bit. But it should be the beginning of next year, no later than the first quarter of next year.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, a question from my friend Alex Dewar at BCG, but I want to add on to it. So Alex asks, with the already oversupplied LNG market, what are the commercial prospects of bringing the project forward? But I want to reframe it slightly differently and say that you have two countervailing forces. You have what Alex raises as the market conditions for LNG, but also these policy measures that are starting to change in your favor. Whether you're talking about the border carbon adjustment in Europe, which would favor your product over any LNG coming from many other parts of the world, or even pipe gas coming in from Russia into Europe. You have pledges to meet Paris climate targets. What do you think the prospects are given these two countervailing forces?
Well, let me say this. I wouldn't change places with any other LNG facility right now. That includes the ones that are up and running. Okay, that includes the ones that are currently trading. And no offense to them, but I'm going to have net zero LNG from the wellhead to when it leaves my thing. And I believe the world is going to demand that. They're already starting to. So I think the market for LNG is going to be strong, by the way. Okay, in general, I want to be fair to everyone. I believe in innovation. We're going to come out of this downturn that we're in. The economies are going to be picking up, and the demand. But the demand for my product in general, people are calling us saying we have to do better. We want you to be successful. We want your product. And let me make one other point. Now, there's a lot of talk about renewables, and I think renewables play a very important role in the future of the world. Okay, but there's some limitations there that we need to be honest about, especially if we want to be energy independent. And let me quickly say, I'm a supporter of renewables. Plenty of people I know in that business, and I'm glad they're doing it, and it's important. But let's talk about two key points there, and this goes back to the market demand question. Number one, if you go back a year ago, the amount of electric generation in the world increased by about 4% in 2019. Okay, that's the last year we have statistics. Renewables could not even meet that increase in demand, not just the baseline in demand, but the increase. So point number one is renewables have a massive gap between the amount of energy they can provide to the world right now and what the world needs are. Okay, that's number one. Number two, for America, here's an issue with renewables. They rely, and I'm talking specifically about solar and wind right now. They rely on precious metals and precious minerals that you cannot find in America. Now, you can find them in the Republic of Congo, and you can find them in China, and you can find them in Russia. But I would question the U.S. as a policy. The idea that we're going to abandon fossil fuels and go all renewables, that's not good policy for America. It's especially not good policy if I can show you that I can take our assets that we do have in America, natural gas, and create clean energy. So to answer your question, do I think there's going to be demand for my product? Absolutely, I think there's going to be demand. And I think there'll be demand as far as you can see. Now, I think we'll bring in other aspects to the energy world. I think renewables will grow. I think there's some look at other alternatives. Those too will grow. But for the United States, it's important to us and our allies, quite frankly, and I don't want to get too much into geopolitical, although I know the Atlantic Council spends a great deal of time talking about that. It's important for the U.S. to be energy independent. And it's important for us to be able to provide that energy to the world. And it's important that that energy be affordable. Because if we want to look at developing nations where they don't have infrastructure in place yet, and they're burning rubber for the sake of how do they create their energy? They're burning rubber and they're burning trees. We need to be able to provide them clean energy, and we'll be able to do it.
So since you raised it, I'm going to have to give a shout out to a recent report the Atlantic Council published late last month on European energy security and the role that the U.S. can play, because we do think LNG plays an important role in European energy security, but also in decarbonizing European energy system. So just a shout out for that. Everyone should go look at that. I've a follow-on question that two people have asked on the policy side, sort of the policies in your favor. But are you planning to use 45Q tax credits, or are you thinking about that as part of the economics of the project?
We do plan and hope to use 45Q tax credits. Our project's not dependent on it, okay? But it is a nice advantage for us to be able to use that. I think it does encourage things that need to be, one of the roles I think government does well, one of the things I think government should do are policies that encourage the type of innovations that will lead to the outcomes that we're looking for, rather than mandate certain things to provide incentives to industry to capture carbon, for instance. We're going to do that. I mean, we capture 4 million tons a year of carbon. And I'm not the physicist, so I may have the wrong number there, but we'd be the third largest. We'll be the third largest carbon capture facility in the world. Okay, it's significant what we're doing. So we will use 45Q tax credits if they're available, which we think they will be. I know they're coming out. They've come out with new rules that we support. We want to continue working on that, but our project alone is not reliant on that.
Got it. So there were a number of questions from the audience who's really engaged. We've got a lot of them. Asking about the technology you're using to capture the CO2 at the facility from the electricity production, et cetera.
Sure.
I know how Net Power works, and we had Bill Brown on this program back in April. So everybody can go and watch a detailed explanation of the alum cycle on the Atlantic Council website. But maybe right now you could just give a sort of 1 or 2 minute explanation of how you plan on capturing the CO2.
Now, see, Randy, I went to Harvard, so my ability to explain the alum cycle is limited. You need to understand that, okay? But the company, you mentioned the company that we're using. Like I said, I'm not a chemist. I'm not a physicist. I'm not even an engineer. I'm a business guy. So we went to go find the companies that had the know-how to do this, or we thought they had the technology to do this. And the company, 8 Rivers and Net Power, provides the engine, let's say, for our facility. In layman's terms, they have technology that allows us to take natural gas, generate electricity, capture those emissions simultaneously, and remove all the emissions and generate enough excess electricity that we can then run our LNG facility. Okay, so they are our partner. We went to them, and they're getting calls from a lot of people about doing this. They liked our development for 2 primary reasons. One is because we have a clean sheet of paper. We don't have old equipment. We don't have old technology. We also aren't limited by the way we think. We want this to be net zero LNG. So it works very well with the Net Power technology. Now, I would tell you, anybody that's on your call that wants a technical answer, we'll be glad to provide them all the technical answers.
Got it. Okay, I have a really good question from Matt Harrison. It's a follow-on question to what you just said about why Net Power and Bill and likes working with you, because it's sort of a clean slate. But what stops other existing LNG facilities from adopting this net zero approach? They could definitely do it from the wellhead, but what stops them from doing it when?
Sure. Good question. Well, it's not as simple as attaching a new piece of equipment to something that you've already spent $10 billion in developing. Okay, so there is a capital investment that most LNG companies have made in a design that it cost them billions of dollars to get done. And it's not as simple as rolling in a new machine and plugging it in and suddenly you're net zero. So the advantage for us is that we're greenfield. We can start from day one. Now, I hope that we use our technology and show that our technology both eliminates the emissions, which it will, and we can be profitable. And I want other companies to ultimately adopt this technology. I don't want to. I want what we're doing to be scalable. Now, I think that actually be more difficult for the existing LNG facilities who are already trading, okay? Because again, they've got so much capital investment already in their current facilities. Now, there are things they can do, like you mentioned, they can go do upstream and things they can do to lower their own carbon footprint. But I think it'll be more difficult for them to do what we're doing.
Got it. Another sort of question about the uniqueness of your business model comes from Brandon Heffinger, who asked about the uniqueness of your site with respect to other sites in the Gulf Coast. And he asks, isn't it true that it's the last and best available site for LNG projects in the region?
You know who asked that question? That's actually my mom that asked that question. Is it the last and best site? I told her to do that. No, no. Look, we think it's the last and best site. I mean, you would be surprised the difficulty in finding a site that's feasible. Okay, not only is it well located in terms of its access to the Gulf of Mexico, we're about 1.5 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. It's well located for tremendous amount of existing infrastructure. Again, we live in an oil and gas state. Texas is our neighbor. There is a tremendous pipeline system and infrastructure system already in place right next to our site. Furthermore, I don't want to go on and on about the site, but we also have a deep draft. We don't have to do additional dredging. The largest ships can come right to our site. So we do think we have the best site. We also have site for room for expansion. And we also have room on our site. Like I said, we're in innovation. We're going to put an educational facility on our site. We're going to do worker training on our site, not just for our own facility, but for the entire Gulf region as they start to do the same things that we're doing. We're going to integrate what we're doing with LSU and with the community college system in Louisiana to train our people, to train Louisianans to be the leader in this type of innovation. So, the unique thing about our site is not only is it great for LNG, it's great for the other things that we want to do.
Got it. Well, you're very lucky, and I'm glad your mother posed that question. Okay, as we always promise, we are going to end on time with half an hour. So we have one final question. I think this is a good one to end on, which is, are you seeking international investments or partnerships to develop and later grow your facility?
We are. I mean, look, it's an interesting time for us. We are getting a lot of interest from Europe. We're getting a lot of interest from around the world. And that's, to me, it's a testimony, not to how smart I am, but it's a testimony to the demand in the world for clean energy. And so we are entertaining a number of groups. Some I would call strategic partners. Some I would say are strictly financial investors. And we're going through that process, and we'll continue to go through that process. So, if someone's interested in that conversation, we're interested in that conversation, and they're ongoing.
Wonderful. Chaz, thank you so much. Really, really fascinating. Really looking forward to watching this develop, and I'm going to surely follow the FERC process starting next year. Thank you, everybody, for joining today. Really, really appreciate all the repeat viewers we're getting. Please be sure to connect with Chaz on LinkedIn. Somebody asked this, but the presentation will be available on the Atlantic Council website, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter channels. You can see all of our previous innovation streams there as well. Feel free to share this with your colleagues. Thank you for all who helped put this event together, including Olga Kokova, Roger Morales, Tom Knoll, and Jasper Gilardi. I hope you all will join us for our next production of Innovation Stream with Pratik Chandhok, Technical Manager for Sustainable Aviation Fuel at Neste, which is next Thursday, June 25th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. And then other upcoming Atlantic Council Global Energy Center events that I think you might be interested in. A paper release about also about sustainable aviation fuel, which will be on June 22nd at 4:30 p.m. And then a paper about new battery technology, or an event about new battery technologies called Beyond Lithium Ion Charging into the Future. That's going to be on June 24th at 11 a.m. You can find out more information about that and the rest of the Atlantic Council's work on the Atlantic Council website. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Chaz, thank you again, and I really look forward to staying in touch.
Same, Randy. Appreciate it very much.